Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings, everyone listening everywhere across the globe. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for joining me this morning, an important morning. A decisive action by President Trump, advised by his international security cabinet, the Vice President, Secretary Pompeo, Secretary Esper, Robert O'Brien, deserves sustained applause, and don't get it on the show today. 5 years ago, I interviewed Donald Trump. September of 2015. He didn't know who Qasem Soleimani was. But when the opportunity came, he had him killed, and all the previous presidents had given him a pass. The leading exporter of terror from Iran. Joining me to discuss this decisive and I think very, very applause-worthy action is Dr. Michael Oren, former Deputy Minister of Israel for Diplomacy, formerly Israel's ambassador to the United States and a historian of the Middle East. Dr. Oren, good morning. Thanks for joining us 2 days in a row.
It's my pleasure. It's an important event.
Give us your perspective as a historian and as an Israeli as to the importance of yesterday's killing of Soleimani.
Qasem Soleimani is responsible for not tens of thousands of deaths, maybe hundreds of thousands of deaths in our region. He's responsible for the displacement of millions. He is responsible for repeated efforts to kill Israelis, kill Americans, kill Arabs, certainly. And no figure in the Middle East, I think, is more deserving of the fate in which he received. I think for Israelis, and not just for Israelis, for all of Iran's adversaries in this region, as all the Sunni Arab states, the return of American deterrence is absolutely crucial. It follows a period of concern, and we've discussed it on the program, Hugh. America withdrawal from Syria, the non-response to the attack on Saudi Arabia and the shooting down of an American drone. We feel like America's back, and Iran wasn't going to be stopped. Iran was going to keep on conquering the Middle East, keep on killing people in this region and beyond, and now someone's put their foot down.
Now, you and I have talked before. Donald Trump exercised restraint when the Iranians kidnapped oil takers, when they shot down an American drone, when they attacked the Saudi Arabian oil facilities. Restraint, restraint, restraint. This time, though, he killed an American. We killed some of his terrorists. He attacked our embassy. Donald Trump killed the number 2 guy in Iran. Is it fair to call Soleimani the number 2 guy?
Yeah, he's the number 2 guy, but he's actually the person with the finger on the trigger. And, what's interesting is that if you look back at the president's response to these Iranian provocations, he kept on saying, well, no American has been killed. They haven't killed an American yet. So you can read from that a red line. You can discern a red line there. The Iranians crossed the red line. And the fact that America stood by that red line is of crucial importance for this region, and not just for the region, for the world. And I'm following the American media very closely. Of course, the New York Times condemning this, a wanton escalation. What area of the world do they think we live in? Do you think that if you throw the Iranians billions of dollars under the Iran nuclear deal, that if you give them legitimacy, they're not going to conquer large swaths of the Middle East? They're not going to invest massively in terror. They're not going to try to provide tens and tens of thousands of missiles that can destroy this country. It's that type of naivete. For us, it's, we shake our heads in wonder, but we're also very grateful for the restoration of American deterrence.
Vice President Biden, now running to be Donald Trump's replacement, said this morning in a statement that Donald Trump had, quote, tossed a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox. I don't know that that's wrong, but I also don't care. I think it was necessary to do that, as it is sometimes necessary to take down old buildings and take out enemies. What do you make of Vice President Biden's reaction?
I'll say that there were multiple fuses leading to this tinderbox that had been lit a long time ago. And frankly, the biggest fuse was the Iran nuclear deal, which gave Iran the money and the cover to extend its hegemony around the Middle East, to provide these long-range missiles, and to surround Israel strategically while retaining its military nuclear infrastructure, its intercontinental ballistic missiles, its blueprints for a nuclear weapon. And in a couple of years, when the flimsy restrictions on the Iran nuclear deal wear off, Iran will not only have conquered much of the Middle East, but actually have the potential to create hundreds of nuclear weapons, all because of this deal. So if you want to look at anybody who lit a fuse, I would look back at former Vice President Biden's administration.
Now, Dr. Oren, I believe as well that every malign actor in the world saw that yesterday, and they said to themselves, I have to be very careful with Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo and Mike Esper and Vice President Pence and Robert O'Brien. I have to be very careful in what I do and how I provoke them because for this president, red lines are red lines. Am I just trying to make a controversial action seem to me to be a question of deterrence?
Well, I think there's also an element of unpredictability about this president, which in international affairs, what can I say, is sometimes an advantage. I used to always say that under the Obama administration, I knew as ambassador, pretty much 95% of the time I knew what that administration was going to do. The situation is pretty much reversed sometimes under this administration, but that has an advantage, not being predictable. And I don't think the Iranians were expecting this. I think it caught them off guard, and I think the fact that it caught them off guard further restores American deterrence because not predictable.
Now, there are two things going on, three, really. I want to talk about Israel, Iraq, and Iran in that order. What precautions are you taking in Israel? What do you expect the short-term and long-term effects in Iraq, which is deeply divided along sectarian lines, but where hundreds of Iraqis opposed to Iranian intervention have been murdered in the past few weeks? And in Iran, 1,000 individual Iranians have been murdered by the IRGC in the street, shot dead for demonstrating. So three countries, three reactions. What do you expect?
Well, in Israel, it's interesting. Our elected leaders, or as it is, our unelected leaders here, are staying mum, keeping a very low profile. But Israel is bracing itself. It's interesting, you know, our one ski resort is on Mount Hermon, and it's open maybe 2 or 3 weeks out of the year. Many people earn their living off those 2 or 3 weeks. Israel has closed down the Mount Hermon ski resort for fear that Iranian rockets may be coming over Mount Hermon from Syria. So we're braced. Our chief of staff just last week described the scenario of a war, which was very similar to what I had written in that Atlantic Monthly article, talking about a war on all fronts, Israel being hit by thousands of rockets, and how we're going to strike back all around us. So we're braced and geared. Now, it may be too early to predict what's going to happen in Iraq and Iran. My sense is of the Middle East, people in the Middle East respect strength, like most human beings, but they respect what they call in this area the strong horse and not the weak horse. And what America has done now is shown strength. And I think that ultimately will fortify the anti-Iranian forces in Iraq and the anti-regime forces and people in Iran itself.
Now, Iran is supposed to have sleeper cells around the world. A, do they? B, do you expect them to be used? And if so, under what sort of time frame do people have to be on alert?
Well, let's remember that Iran is the largest state sponsor of terror in the world. And yes, it has undertaken several terrorist plots in Europe. It has killed Israelis in Europe. It was responsible for the 1994 bombing of the Buenos Aires Jewish Center, which killed 85 people and wounded hundreds. So Iran has proven its ability and commitment to mount terrorist attacks around the world. In 2011, the Iranians were going to conduct a terrorist attack in downtown Washington, assassinating the Saudi ambassador. And I must say, as Israel's ambassador at the time, I was also targeted. So here are the Iranians willing to assassinate 2 foreign ambassadors in the capital of the United States of America. And that was before the Iran nuclear deal. Imagine what they're willing to do now. We all have to be on our guard.
We do have to be on our guard, and I'll stress that today. You just mentioned the $150 billion that the Obama administration gave to Iran as part of the nuclear deal. Is it fair, as I have said, that 150 went from Khamenei's hands into the control of Soleimani and into the export of terror?
Well, it didn't go to building schools and roads and bridges, did it now? Okay, and we predicted it wouldn't. And that's why the people are protesting in the streets of Iranian cities. Of course, it went directly for terror. And, you know, the great irony was that the Europeans were so happy to give the Iranians this money, and the Iranians used the money to ethnically cleanse Syria of Sunnis, replacing them with Shiites. And you know where the Sunnis went to? They went to Europe. Europe was basically funding its own sort of suicide, its own crises. And you can't make this stuff up. And Israelis, we sat on the side with our mouths hanging open and shaking our heads. Somebody actually thought that by throwing all this money and legitimacy to Iran, it would transform this regime into a responsible regional power. and strengthen the moderates. Well, guess what?
Yeah, that someone's got a lot of names. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Ben Rhodes, Susan Rice. It's got a lot of names, that someone, John Kerry. Can you hold over the bake, Dr. Oren? I want to talk to you about the coming conflict, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'll be right back. Dr. Michael Oren is joining us from Israel this morning in the aftermath of the assassination of Iranian Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani, as well as other terrorists in an American drone strike. We've owned it. We are not shy about it. President Trump hasn't taken a bow, but he has certainly taken responsibility, and it's an unequivocally good thing that Soleimani is dead. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.